Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The New HR Mandate, Leading People and Performance in the Age of AI. I'm Kate, and I'm on the marketing team at BetterWorks. So I'm honored to introduce our speaker, LeAnne Lagasse. LeAnne is an HR consultant, keynote speaker, and author whose passion and personal mission is to equip leaders with the knowledge and skills they need to drive engagement, retention, and performance. Please join me in welcoming LeAnne Lagasse.
Hi, everyone. I am pumped to get to share with you today a little bit about a topic that I think all of us as HR and people leaders are thinking about and we're struggling through. And that is, how can we lead well in this era of AI? How do we manage performance? What are some of the cool tools that we can use? So what we're going to do today is dig in and talk a little bit about some of the problems we're facing, some of the possibilities ahead of us, and also just some practical ways that we can communicate well as we hopefully lead our organizations through this kind of AI transformation. So my goal for our time together today is for us to identify some of the problems, talk about some of the possibilities, and then learn some very practical things that we can kind of talk through with our teams about this AI transformation. So let's jump in. All right. You probably, if you joined this webinar, if you were attracted to this kind of topic, my hunch is that although you represent very unique and distinct industries and organizations, my hunch is that you are sitting in this place in your organization where you're realizing that what historically worked, or maybe even didn't work, but we were trying to make work with our HR processes and the rhythms in our organization when it comes to performance management are not feeling like they are getting us the outcomes, at least that we hoped they would get us in the past. You look around, you open your, social media feeds, or you go to an HR conference and everything is about AI transformation. And if you're like a lot of the leaders that I serve in the work that I do as a consultant and a coach and, a speaker, you are probably feeling a lot of tension yourself of what does this mean for us and our function, in the HR function and the people function, to operate in this world where it's kind of like equal parts. It feels disruptive, but also it feels like this incredible opportunity that maybe we could even be on the front end of. So if that's you, you're not alone. Again, my hunch is that you're here for a specific reason. We have a very weighty responsibility in the HR and the people function to figure out how to make things happen through the people that we get to serve, through the team members that we get to work with every day. And it's a weighty responsibility, but it's also an incredible opportunity. The problem that we're solving for right now, it's not the only problem, but this is the problem we're going to focus on today, is that there is right now a major sort of performance disconnect in that our work is more dynamic than it's ever been. And I realize that if you're on this webinar today, again, you represent maybe a very unique industry that has been impacted in different ways. But in general, our work is so much more dynamic than it's ever been. Our performance management systems, most of them are more static, or another word that we could use would be episodic, right? Where we sort of plan for these very structured conversations that happen once in a while. We've got our annual performance reviews. We've got, maybe some quarterly reviews that we're using. But the reality is that those occasional feedback sessions, those, again, traditional HR tools that we've used are not keeping pace with daily change. And that's something that I hear HR leaders that I work with all the time, again, lament. So if we're thinking about, the place we're in right now, it is absolutely the case that we are being asked on one hand to be innovative and think outside the box and get very creative about how we're using technology and AI and automation to move the needle in our organizations. All the while, our team members are still craving the same things that they've always craved. The science of employee engagement is pretty steady, meaning our team members are still wanting clarity and transparent communication and trust and belonging and all of those things that drive engagement and retention. The challenge is that our historical performance management rhythms are not keeping pace. So in other words, the gap between how we are working on a day-to-day basis and how agile we're expected to be, and then how we measure that has never been wider. Here's an example of that. According to Gallup, right now in the United States, only 26% of employees strongly agree that the feedback that they receive helps them do their work better. Now, if you're a leader of any kind, this is the kind of thing that can kind of keep you up at night, or it can feel really discouraging. You think 26%, what? Like, I'm spending time trying to invest in my employees. I'm spending time trying to give feedback and it's not working. But here's what I want to encourage you with. It's kind of good news, bad news, right? But what I want to encourage you with is when I see a stat like this in the work that I do, what this says to me is this is less a people manager problem and it's more a systems problem. It's that the systems that we have in our organization are not facilitating, they're not built to, if you will, facilitate the kind of continuous conversations, continuous feedback, continuous listening in the flow of work that matters for our team members, that drives our business outcomes, right? So it's less that, oh, we just need to train our people managers more. We do need to do that probably, but it's also we need to build better systems and rhythms in our organization that facilitate continuous feedback. The good news, this is how I roll. It is up and down with me, or good news, bad news, right? The good news is that Gallup also found that when companies implement continuous feedback tools, they can experience a significant increase in employee engagement, with some studies showing a rise up to 20%. And if you're like, we will take it. We will take a 20% rise in employee engagement. And the reason for this is because when we get better at continuous feedback and we use tools that help facilitate continuous feedback, we are touching a lot of these engagement drivers that matter the most to our team members. When we use continuous feedback and build rhythms across the organization, we send messages more frequently about, recognition messages or belonging messages, or messages about goal and role alignment and mission and vision, right? When we do that more consistently, we're in a better position to drive the outcomes that we need in our organization. So if I had to have like a thesis statement for today, this is what I would say. I would say, the future of engagement and performance management isn't episodic like it's been in the past, where we do these things in these moments in time. Instead, it's continuous. It is the kind of engagement and performance management conversations that happen in the flow of work, right? In our everyday rhythms. And so organizations that are doing a really good job are those that are building rhythms across the employee life cycle that facilitate continuous feedback. So what this means for us as HR and as people leaders is we have this incredible opportunity, this new mandate, if you will, where we're moving away from what was historically viewed as, our function is reacting to or managing change, right? Like priorities and objectives and all those things are set at the top, and they still are to a large degree, right? But those things are set at the top, and then our role is to kind of figure out how to make that happen, adjust to it, react to it. We now sit at this place where we as HR and people leaders actually get to design for adaptability and resilience and transformation in our organizations. We have the ability to move from being perceived as just sort of enforcing policies to then enabling performance across the organization. I think back to sort of pre-pandemic, and I was just having a conversation with one of my HR leaders that I coach a couple of weeks ago. And I said, the funny thing about this is, in a lot of ways, HR was kind of already on the cutting edge. If you think back, like pre-pandemic, some of you were already starting to experiment with using automation and like early stages of what we now see as like generative AI. Like we were already kind of starting to move in that direction. And, some of us were like fighting to get buy-in for those things like pre-pandemic. So we were already kind of in this place where we were thinking about what's possible to reduce that admin load, to improve processes across the organization. And now it's even more so the case that we have this opportunity to go from being perceived just as one of my coaching clients said, sometimes I feel like as HR, we're just viewed as sort of like the hall monitor, that we have this ability to move from that hall monitor perception, which was never accurate, by the way, of course, but that perception to, wow, we have this ability to enable performance across the employee life cycle. And what's, I think, significant about this position we're in is it's tricky for a couple of reasons. One, because when you think about, we have maybe pressure expectations from our leaders or even, external stakeholders, a board that says, we want you to use AI or use, tools or automation to increase output per employee or to, bias more productivity or efficiency. But simultaneously, we have, as I said before, our team members who are also saying, yes, but we still crave all the things that we've always craved. And so how do we strike a balance in this new world? That's the position that we find ourselves in. It is an opportunity. It's a weighty opportunity, but I think that we're up to the task. I also think that similarly, kind of to this last point, is we also get to move from being owners just of process to being able to, through the systems that we build and the tools that we use, really shape the overall culture. If we can play a part in building new rhythms and systems and structures that lead to the thriving and flourishing of people, guess what? Our organizations are going to thrive and flourish. So it's about changing our mindsets from what has historically been that transactional nature between perhaps the HR and people function and like an exec team to thinking, no, we actually are on the cusp of real transformation in the HR and the people function. Our job is to reconcile all of those expectations through the systems that we build. And that just really, really pumps me up. I think it is, AI or automation, right, giving us these tools, but it's still us as HR and people leaders, the experts that we already were pre-AI, right, or alongside AI, that expertise coupled with the AI and with all these cool tools that we have that allows us to get better outcomes for meaningful human progress. So I want to share just a couple. I wish we had more time today, but I want to share just a couple of the ways that I have seen with my clients and some of my coaching clients too, the ways that AI can unlock, this next era of performance management. This list is not exhaustive, by the way, but these are some of the biggest things that I see making a difference for people like you who are doing the work of HR and people every day. The first is that when you use AI well, when you use great tools, you have this ability to grow in what I like to think of as decision intelligence, right? We're getting continuous insight. We are surfacing real-time trends. We have this ability to get data real time that used to take us forever to get access to. So an example of this is maybe in the area of employee listening, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But historically, perhaps we did an engagement survey once a year or maybe twice a year, right? And how many of you as HR, as people leaders, you've gotten some data back and you've gone, what in the world? I wish that I knew that this was going on 6 months ago, but I couldn't do anything about it then, right? And now it's here, it's looking me in the face, and we had no idea that this was going on. So AI and a lot of the tools that are available to us now give us this ability to surface real-time trends. So imagine a situation in which you're getting data in real time that tells you, oh, there's something interesting going over here in this corner of, the sales team, or there's something really interesting happening over here where it looks like maybe we're having some gold drift, right? AI has the ability to do that because it's embedded across the systems that our team members are using every single day, again, in the flow of work. And that continuous insight equips us with really good tools to use in conversation, right? Where AI can't help as much, but where we as people get to exchange meaning with one another, which is going to, of course, drive engagement and retention. So in addition to that continuous insight, I think that another part of this I see where I see AI making a big difference is providing clarity at scale. So in the past, I think, again, imagine your leaders, they set a vision, they go to a strategy, an offsite, they come back and they say, here's the route we want to run. And everybody else has to figure out, how do we ladder up to that? How do we align to that? And it feels disengaged and, fragmented or siloed. What is so cool about the tools that we have at our disposal now is we can actually use AI to get smarter about our goal setting, to help us cascade down in a way that creates alignment across the entire organization. But here's the really cool thing. It isn't just about, doing that in like an episode, again, that episodic piece where it's like, we did it and then we aligned and now we know what we're doing. No, the way we work now is so much more agile than it's ever been. And so we have this ability to goal set and then re-goal set. And I know that can feel very overwhelming, but what AI does is it empowers us and enables us to do that without slowing us down. So one of the things I see a lot in organizations is where there is a struggle to cascade down, that you often have employees that struggle with role ambiguity because they don't know exactly where the goalpost is at any given time. And sometimes they'll say things like, I live in perpetual whiplash land where, it's like we're doing this and then nope, we're going to do this. What I think AI can enable us to do, it can enable managers to do, is to keep everybody aligned and on the same page. That for me has been one of the coolest things to see my clients get to experience, is how that transforms clarity at scale. Okay, and then the last little piece that I want to say here, again, this list is not exhaustive. It's perhaps my favorite though, and my background, I'm a communication professor, so this is why. It'll make sense to you why this is my very favorite. But AI and the tools that we have at our disposal now also allow us more than ever to personalize communication, which, oh my word, drives engagement and retention like you could not believe. That what we know, the science of engagement, is that people want to feel seen and heard and valued as unique contributors in our organizations. And AI has the potential, if we use it well, it has the potential to equip us to get better at tailoring and coaching and giving feedback to our individual team members. A couple of weeks ago, to share a story on this, I was working with one of my coaching clients. He's an administrator in a hospital system. And so we were kind of workshopping on one of our calls about a really hard performance management conversation that he was about to have. And so he and I we were doing our regular thing. We were going back and forth. And I asked him if he had taken any notes over, the past several months during his one-on-one meetings. Now, he was not using a super sophisticated platform. He had a Google Doc, but he was inputting. He was a good note taker, so he was keeping a lot of notes from these one-on-ones. And I said, what would be really cool? Would you be down for let's open ChatGPT right here on this call and let's paste in some of this information and see what ideas and themes ChatGPT is going to find. Now, we could have done that. It would have taken us a long time to do that, he and I together. And by the way, disclaimer, always make sure you're following your organization's policies about AI usage and, protecting data. But what we did is we opened it. We put this, just some notes, just copied and pasted his notes from his one-on-ones and started, prompting using smart prompting. And all of a sudden, I can see on the call his eyes kind of lighting up and him making connections. And he looked at one thing and said, I don't really think I would frame it that way because here's this one thing about this employee. And so we said, okay, let's tell ChatGPT that. So we were just iterating together. And in like 15 minutes of just experimenting, he came out of that with not a script, but some bullet points that were so personalized personalized and concrete and unique to that particular team member that he felt equipped as a manager to go in and have that conversation, that probably it would have taken him a long time to get to that position if he hadn't used that tool. So I share that just to say, sometimes we get overwhelmed thinking about having to use these super sophisticated tools, but really the heart of it is, how can we use what we have to get us to really good outcomes in our communication? So I think these are three really cool ways that AI is transforming our organizations and our people function. But I also know that it's tricky. It's really tricky to figure out, well, how and where and when do we sort of embed some of these things across the life cycle? So I thought this would be a good time for another poll. I would love to hear what you think, because you might be sitting here going, yes, LeAnne, that sounds awesome. It sounds great in theory that we could, have these ongoing performance conversations or build it into the regular flow of work. But what are some of the biggest challenges you think that you face when it comes to having those regular performance conversations? What is it that's holding your team back? Is it time and bandwidth, lack of tools and automations? Here's a big one: fear of change or manager resistance. I feel like we could have split those into two, right? There's a lot going on there. I love that. Not sure how to make it stick. And then, as always, if you have something else that's really unique, let us know in the chat. Okay, let's see. So yeah, time and bandwidth, amen to that. Yeah. Again, what you're describing, what you're showing me here is very consistent with the leaders that I work with. But it looks like so far time and bandwidth is in first place for sure. That's what's so cool about these tools that we're talking about today, is that if you put the work in to build the system and get the system, set up for success in your organization, you buy back so much time and you build those rhythms again in the flow of work. So to kind of wrap that portion up, what I want to say is this: the organizations out there that I see who are doing a really good job of this right now, they're not just using AI or automation for the sake of it, right? Just to check off a box and to think we're being innovative. No, they are using these tools to get to human outcomes that really matter. So we're reverse engineering from those human outcomes. And what I mean by that is, we're not going to just implement something to implement it. And we're definitely not going to communicate about it that way. What we're going to do is we're going to think, what is the human outcome that we need or want, or the organizational, like the mission critical outcome that we have or that we want, and how are we going to reverse engineer using the tools that we have? So what I want to do is I want to share just three ways, or three kind of areas, I should say, of your work as HR and people leaders that you could think about what the critical outcome is and then reverse engineer from that outcome. Okay, so first, let's think about goal and role alignment. Here's the research, right? Here's the outcome that we want. Employees who strongly agree that they can link their goals to the organization's missions and goals are 3 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. And by the way, right now in the United States, only about 32, 31%, depending on what week it is, of employees are what we would call engaged. Employees who strongly agree they can link their goals are much, much more engaged. So think about, in the old sort of system, kind of OG, if you will, HR, what we're doing is the leaders are setting priorities and then we're setting goals, hopefully. And then it's kind of like set it and forget it, It's like, oh yeah, I think I remember setting some goals for the quarter, right? And so they're not top of mind. We're not getting messages on a daily basis about purpose and alignment and about mission and vision. And so what we want to do, if this is the outcome that we're looking for, what we want to do is reverse engineer and think, what are the tools and the systems across the employee lifecycle that will get us there? So imagine a world in which your AI tools can help you set goals relative to what those big picture strategies and priorities are. a world where your AI tools can help you identify areas where there's a disconnect or barriers between, where you are, the resources you have or don't have, and what those mission critical objectives are. So AI, because it's embedded across all the tools that we use in our organization, we have this ability to re-goal and set new priorities, help our employees stay connected to the vision, the mission, and the values on a consistent basis. That is not using AI for AI's sake. That's using AI to get us to an outcome, an engagement outcome that, again, improves performance, right? We're wanting to tie maybe things like our OKRs or our KPIs to even learning goals or, skill development that our employees are doing. AI has the potential to develop individual learning plans for team members relative to their role and maybe a career trajectory. So the possibilities are, limitless, it feels like. And I know that can feel overwhelming, but what I want you to remember is if you start with what the outcome that you want is, and then reverse engineer, you and your people tend to feel much more agency about the process. So, okay, that's just goal and role alignment. Let's look at feedback and recognition. This is a big part of what we're talking about today. So again, if the goal is that we want to strengthen relationships between, let's say, people managers and their team members, we want to strengthen that. We want to increase maybe frequency of recognition because we know that that drives engagement. We want to facilitate meaningful feedback because check this out. Okay, again, this would be an objective or an outcome we're looking for. If 80% of employees say that they have received, or 80%, I should say, of employees who say that they've received meaningful feedback in the last week, they're fully engaged, regardless of whether they're remote or hybrid or in-person employees. So what that should say to us is feedback in the flow of work is going to make a very big difference in our overall engagement and then ultimately our performance. So imagine a world where, again, the tools that you're using and the AI that you're using in your across the life cycle is reducing the admin load for your managers, and it is equipping them with tools to give better, more individualized feedback, that it's prompting them to deliver concrete and specific recognition that connects to the goals, the objectives, the strengths of their team members. Imagine a world where your AI tools are helping managers, just like we did with my client a minute ago, and that was a Google Doc and ChatGPT, but using cool tools to help them craft more compelling communication, to deliver hard messages with more emotional intelligence, to coach employees to grow and to develop in a more effective way. That is what is ahead of us in the people in the HR function if we embrace the tools. And then, okay, last one. Again, I wish I had more time. I have so much more I would love to say. But this one is very near and dear to my heart, and that is employee listening. I touched on it earlier. But here's the reality. Here's the bad news. Okay. Right now in the United States, only 3 in 10 employees agree that at work, my opinions seem to count. 30% of employees. And what I said earlier about, AI having this ability to just radically transform our employee listening, right? That happens when we as organizations build systems across the employee life cycle. And I've said that, you've heard me say that a lot. That's intentional, that we're building it across the employee life cycle. We are moving from this system that was more of like employee survey as a verdict, right? Which is like, here's what we've learned about how our employees feel. We're moving from that to this continuous feedback we're getting from employees that helps us adjust and pivot. It helps managers go, oh, this isn't clicking for some reason, pivoting, adjusting, right? Improving my communication. It's helping us identify perception problems. One thing I say all the time to my clients is where there is a perception problem, there is a communication opportunity, right? So it's one thing to sort of go, wow, employees are really, they've got this perception of us as like verdict, right? Where we can maybe heap shame on ourselves or feel resentful. It's another thing to say, wow, that this perception is an opportunity for us to close the gap, right? With some strategic communication. So imagine a world where, again, your admin load around like employee listing has decreased because you've built good systems. And now you're getting that slow drip that we talked about earlier, that continuous feedback that helps you make better decisions as an organization. But it also sends the message to employees that, as it turns out, your opinions do count. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch when you use strategic employee listening this way and you use cool tools to get you there. You get the data to make better choices and to lead your teams well, but you also send a message that their opinions count. So that building feedback loop, in is a very important part of this. The challenge, though, is that with AI, one thing I will tell my clients all the time, the output you get is only as good as the input, right? So we've got to get good at prompting team members using strategic tools and strategic questions. And so I wanted to provide a resource that might help you with that. This is a tool that I use with a lot of my clients. It is a list of like tried and true, amazing employee engagement questions and here's the whole point, that you can use in any system, tool, process that you already use. So you can use it in your one-on-ones. You could equip managers to use them in team meetings. You could build them into your pulse surveys. You can put them in your, HRIS, your platforms, the tools that you use, whatever you have that you're already using. These are the kind of questions that are going to fuel employee listening in your organization and get you good data. So if you'd like to download that, there's a QR code, or you can check out the URL down there at the bottom. If you have any trouble with it, you could shoot me an email later and I'd be happy to send it to you. Okay, so let's keep moving. One of the questions that I hear leaders ask a lot about this period of time we're in, this like AI transformation, is, okay, how do we move in this direction while also maintaining the trust of our team members? And that's a big question because if you are like most leaders that I work with, you're feeling a little bit of that tension of, this is equal parts awesome and feels exciting, but also creepy, or like overwhelming, and it's equal parts. And so maybe I feel like energized about what's possible, but also a little bit overwhelmed. Guess what? Our team members feel the same way. So what we can do as leaders is to stay very grounded in purpose around this, asking ourselves questions like, okay, are we equipping our people to use AI to help us achieve meaningful human outcomes? An example of this, you could use AI to generate like email templates to use in your talent acquisition process. You could crank out some quick AI generated templates and maybe save yourself a little bit of time. But the bigger question, where I think you continue to earn the trust of your team members, is, how do we use AI not only just to save ourselves time, but to get to a more meaningful human outcome, which is, if you want people that we're wanting to recruit them to our organizations, we want them to feel seen, heard, and known in our communication. So can AI, and it can, help us tailor really custom, meaningful messages? Are we using it just for the sake of using it? Or are we using it to get to meaningful human outcomes? Are we giving managers space to coach and connect and inspire, or just, again, to improve productivity and efficiency? Because those can be wins for us. But if we do that independent of connecting with the people who are supposed to be driving engagement and retention, we're going to be leaving a lot on the table. How can we use AI to deepen trust and understanding? How can we measure success by the human outcomes, not just, again, the efficiency that it delivers? I think if we are responsible and ethical in our adoption of these really cool tools, we're going to keep questions like this front of mind, right? Top of mind. All right. So that then raises a question about, Well, how in the midst of that, how do we communicate to employees in a way that keeps them on board, helps get buy-in, but also helps us drive this transformation? So I want to share just 4 points. And again, I need more time with you, but I wanted to share 4 points. The first here is that the organizations who are doing a good job of this are engaging in perspective taking. So they are acknowledging openly, talking about this openly, that this is a weird period of time, right? Your team members feel that way. You feel that way. Let's talk about it. Let's engage in perspective taking and some empathy and say, hey, here are some ways you might be feeling, which, by the way, this is just a pro tip, communication tip in general. In general, human beings do not love being told how they feel. Now, what's funny about us is we want people to understand how we feel, but we don't like being told how we feel. So this is the difference between saying, we know that AI is really scary and we know you're very scared about it, right? Well, employees are going, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm thinking or feeling. So it's a difference between that and saying it wouldn't surprise us, or it would make sense if you felt a little bit of excitement or curiosity or resistance or fear, or you're creeped out a little bit, right? So when you provide more of a menu for your employees about what their experience is, you're going to catch so many more of them in a place where they feel seen, heard, and valued about the adoption. So that's the first part, is engaging in perspective taking. Speaking of perspective taking, okay, so on this format, I can't show you the actual TikTok, so I just screenshotted it. But this cracked me up. I saw it the other day. Imagine the audio is like, you've probably heard it if you're on the platforms, but it's like you're talking to a baby. It's like baby talk, right? And, it's corporate America right now, executives, and the images or the video is like basically drowning employees with AI. Now, what's funny about this is it taps into something that I think a lot of organizations are missing, is that they're not talking openly about what this experience is like from your team members' perspective. So I don't show you this to discourage you from using these awesome tools. I'm showing you this to say your communication is everything. Your communication will make a difference about whether employees feel motivated and excited and bought in, or whether they feel like this, what is that, a duck maybe, getting, just drowned by you wanting to adopt AI. So perspective taking is everything. Secondly, and this is a mindset shift that I think a lot of leaders can make, is, modeling a learning mindset with AI is, instead of coming in and here's what we're mandating and here's how we're going to use this and here's how your role is shifting effective immediately based on, what our projections are with how AI can change your role, right? That is going to shut everybody down. Stress response increases when we hear those kind of messages. Instead, the organizations who are doing a really good job are those that are saying, hey, we are experimenting. We are learning together. We are figuring this out together. Let's get curious about it. Let's put on that curious hat. Let's be Ted Lasso, if you're a Ted Lasso fan. Let's experiment together and show them what's possible. Don't underestimate the power of a really great demo, right? Where you're just sitting down and showing someone what's possible, not to mandate it quite yet. And some of you may be at that point already in your organizations where people are already really using this tool. Some of you maybe not. For those of you who aren't, I would say slow your roll a little bit and think, how can I show my team members what's possible? Get them curious about this and excited about what outcomes we're going to get to with using these tools, right? So model a learning mindset. The third piece is tied to that second one, which is anchoring messages about AI to purpose and desired outcomes. And what I mean by that is desired outcomes and purpose for your audience, for your team members. So here's an example of what that sounds like in action. Imagine you're an employee, right? And you're getting a message about how we're maybe experimenting or what we're going to do with AI. There's a difference between a message that says, hey, we're going to start implementing AI because we want to be more efficient, we want to be productive, we want to be innovative. Now, those things are true, right? But is that the kind of message that gets buy-in? Not as much. Instead, think about evolving your messaging to be about what are those human outcomes that we talked about. Okay. So instead of we're implementing AI, it is, hey, we are as an organization committed to experimenting and exploring what's possible with AI to help you, maybe as a people manager, focus on coaching and connection, the kind of stuff that matters the most. We want to free you of your administrative load to be able to do the things that only you can do, right? Do you hear the difference in those messages? That is the difference between an employee that's going to feel likely shut down and is going to feel very clinical and buttoned up about the outcome that we're working towards, and an employee that feels like they're a part of a bigger transformation story that's happening in the organization. Okay, last point is that organizations who do a good job here are those that narrate the change openly. So they create feedback loops so that employees have an opportunity to share how they are experiencing the transformation. What's working, what's not, what feels clunky, what does feel natural and in the flow of work, and what feels like we haven't quite figured it out. One of my clients recently, they're kind of at this place where they're starting to experiment, and they got a team together, and they said, hey, we're going to give you an official assignment. We want you to go explore with ChatGPT ways that you could reduce the administrative load in your role. We're not marrying ourselves to any of these things. We're just exploring. And so what they did is they gave employees, I think, a week. They came back and they had like this brainstorming session together. And the employees were able to say, these were some things that ChatGPT recommended. These are some things that inside our platform recommended, right, for goals or restructuring things. And what was so cool about it is that they had this very open conversation. And the leader that I talked to afterwards said, it didn't feel fearful. It felt like exploratory. And so they're narrating the change. They're creating feedback loops. That's the goal, is if you are going through any kind of change, especially this kind of transformation that we're talking about, narrate the change. So my question for you would be, what do you feel like, based on what we've talked about today, is your next step? Because I know we talked about a lot, and you're not going to be able to do all the things. The last thing I want to do is add to your, shame to-do list, as I like to call it for myself. But for you, what is that next step? And my challenge would be this: stay focused, right? Use AI insights to identify the things that matter most, but keep listening deeply. Use those feedback loops that we talked about to, again, narrate change, and then act congruently. Lead with transparency and alignment. And if you do that, you are much more poised to lead through this transformation, to build the kind of HR and people function that this world of work kind of demands of us these days. So I want to just tell you how much I appreciate you staying engaged and connected with me today. Here's a way you can keep in touch with me. And I just want to tell you, if you have any questions, that you can always reach out. The slide deck is available. I saw a couple of questions come through. Slide deck is available for you, but if you need anything at all, let me know. So I am going to pass it back to Kate. But thanks again, everybody. It was so good to be here.
Thank you so much, LeAnne. That was incredible. We really appreciate you joining us today. And before we introduce our next speaker, I just want to open up another poll again to learn more from everyone here in the audience. What's your biggest priority for 2026 when it comes to performance management? We'll leave that up as I welcome to the stage Sam Schlunz, who is our amazing solutions engineer, who's been with us at BetterWorks for almost 7 years. So excited to have him join us and walk us through some of the communication strategies and AI tools that we have here in BetterWorks. Sam, welcome.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you all for spending some time with us today talking about AI and how we can enable our leadership as well as our front lines. I really love LeAnne's focus on outcomes, especially when it comes to the use of AI. Something I hear all the time in my conversations is how can we keep the human in the loop? And by focusing on those outcomes, I think it's pretty clear that we're being super conscious of how our employees are feeling about AI. Well, as Kate mentioned, I'd love to take some time just to talk you through how BetterWorks is supporting this transition to AI and how we're supporting our users through the transition. For those less familiar with BetterWorks, we are a best-in-breed performance enablement tool. And so what we provide are ongoing continuous goal tracking, one-on-ones, performance and development conversations, and then, of course, the feedback and recognition that LeAnne touched on a little bit in her conversation. So what I'd like to do is just take a moment and point out some of the AI-specific ways that we're really enabling the users. And I like to think about a lot of times when I'm in these scenarios, what if I'm a brand new employee to the company? Oftentimes, as we're joining an organization, unless we were there for the launch of that goal-setting methodology, it can be very hard to catch up on the culture of goal setting, the why behind it, what I'm supposed to be focusing on. Honestly, in our conversations, we talk about goal setting all the time. And it can be hard enough for me to figure out what I'm going to be tracking and working on throughout the year. And so that's where you see our Goal AI Assist button. It's something that beyond being able to help the user to figure out what to focus on, what it's actually doing is tapping into all of the information that it knows about me as a user. And so it's going to be looking at, of course, my role, the job description, but beyond that, it's going to be tapping into strategic items in BetterWorks, such as our top company goals. It's going to be pulling information from my manager's goals, from the feedback that I've received in BetterWorks. And so AI is here to help me pull together all of this information that's spread across, my personal data, the top company goals, the data associated with my role. And it's going to help pull all of that together and suggest for me business goals as well as developmental opportunities. And so again, what I see here is the focus on the conversation is, how can we execute on these goals? What is the outcome that we're hoping to drive? And less of the focus is on me as a user trying to figure out what I'm going to be tracking or setting for my goals. And, again, when we think about LeAnne's point about clarity at scale, AI is here to help be in each and every one of those instances where your team members might be leveraging AI to figure out what it is I should be tracking. And again, the possibilities there for attaching to the top company goals or things that my boss are working on. That's clarity for me as a user. That's driving execution for the organization. In addition to helping folks whenever they're creating their goals, I also want to focus in on how it's supporting the manager and employee in their get-togethers throughout the year. So what we're looking at here is either a mid-year or a quarterly check-in. The cadence is up to you. But what we're offering, as LeAnne put it, is an opportunity for AI to look over my shoulder and maybe it helps me to communicate better whenever I'm actually submitting these responses to my employees. And so if you read the first couple of lines of this feedback that a manager is providing, it's full of slang. A lot of folks, especially if English isn't first language, may not understand it. And so prior to submitting it, I actually get to leverage AI to, again, look over my shoulder and say, hey, Sam, here's maybe a more effective way to communicate that. Here's a safer way to communicate it. But beyond that, our AI is also going to be coaching the user on why it made that suggestion. And so folks are going to become more aware of their implicit biases. They're going to start to become way more aware of maybe some of the tendencies that they have when communicating. But more than anything, we think about the employee. Now they're going to be receiving coaching and communication on their level and in a way that accurately reflects the way that managers should be leading. Another really cool example of AI in these responses is maybe I am a manager that is English second language. And so written communication may just not be my preferred method or even my strong suit. And so I think about folks, again, that maybe they're leveraging AI just to help fine tune some of that communication. If they want to be putting themselves in the best light, if they want to be coaching their employees in the best way possible, for them, that might be using AI to help translate some of their written word into more cohesive paragraph form. Just another way that folks, are constantly reaching out to AI. When it gets time for these conversations, your managers are going to be using it, your employees are going to be using it. So our philosophy is let's embed that workflow right here in the process for your managers and employees. And it's going to give them that safer, more effective way to communicate their point, but also so coach them on why it is that they're making that suggestion. And one more point on, just making this not only outcome-based, but a more effective coaching and development conversation. At BetterWorks, a cohesive experience is critical to our success. So when I get together for my quarterly or mid-year check-ins, my goals are going to be a part of that. Often we find that's what I'm working on. And then the feedback that I've received is also a really important part of the coaching that I receive. Oftentimes, folks will consider that how I'm showing up at work. And so as both the employee as well as the manager, I'm actually able to leverage a summary of all of the feedback that Damon has received so far this year. It's going to pull out strengths. It's going to pull out areas of improvement. But in general, we're starting to really pull together all of that important data. Again, as a manager, it can be really hard for me to remember what I accomplished last quarter, let alone those 10 to 15 folks that I'm going to be responsible for at the end of the year. And so how can we use AI to better serve our employees with really smart summaries? How can we make sure that they're supported in their written communication with improving their responses, both from a bias as well as just from a communication standpoint? And oh, by the way, let's pull it all together in some really great summaries to make sure that we're using these get-togethers as efficiently as we possibly can. And I'd encourage anyone, if you're interested in spending a little bit more time with BetterWorks, feel free to reach out with any questions that you may have. Again, at BetterWorks, we're so excited about leveraging AI and keeping employees and managers at the heart of it, while also focusing on those outcomes, as LeAnne mentioned.
Amazing, Sam. Thank you so much for walking us through that. Really appreciate it. And then I know we're about to run out of time, but we did have a few questions. I think we can answer one or two at the end here. If LeAnne, if I can invite you to come back on stage to speak to your team. We got a question asking, how do we make continuous feedback feel effortless, not burdensome? LeAnne, would you mind answering?
Such a good question. Yes, I love the question because I think it does speak to a challenge that sometimes we find ourselves in as leaders, where we're creating additional problems, where we think we're solving something, we create additional problems. So the last thing we want to do is, yes, make something more burdensome. The answer to this question is kind of what we talked about before. You have to build those conversations in the regular flow of your work. So the more you can embed the tools that we're talking about today into the systems, rhythms that you're already using, and you're really just amplifying what's possible in those pre-existing moments. And yeah, you may need to add some here or there to hopefully not to make it burdensome, but to get to better outcomes. But the clients I have that have done this very well, they're almost auditing their systems, their performance management rhythms, and going, how do we get smarter about enabling our managers here using AI, or using some of these tools? How do we improve one-on-ones and the process of delivering feedback or employee listening using these tools so that we're not just adding a bunch of new steps, we're maximizing and we're amplifying what we were already doing. So I think that's a quick answer. But I think if you don't want to make it burdensome, you've got to figure out how to enable managers. And what I have found is when you do that, then those managers buy in because they go, oh my goodness, you mean I can use this tool to help me make my performance review process more streamlined? Sign me up. Absolutely. So if you do it well, it's not perceived as burdensome. It's perceived as just in the flow of work. Yeah. Great question.
Awesome. Thank you, LeAnne. And 30-second speed round for one final question. Alexandra had asked, how do we make our employees feel like they are not going to be replaced by AI?
Another great question. So much more to say, but here's what I heard recently at a conference from actually a friend who was presenting on AI in kind of a different area, and said that the way they've been communicating this is, you won't be replaced. You likely won't, maybe some will, but will likely be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI very well, right? And so I don't say that to increase fear, but to say if we can help our team members feel that we want to explore what's possible to evolve your role so that you get to do more meaningful work, so that you have a better experience in your role. I think that's the goal. That was a very quick answer, and I hope it didn't invoke more fear than it did actually answer the question.
No, that was great. I want to thank LeAnne and Sam so much for this wonderful webinar, and thank you all for attending today. Have a great day. Bye.